allows the holder to define the access road restrictions, how you can build your road, the size of the harvest areas, the equipment used in the harvest, residual cover after the harvest, and so forth. And all of a sudden, the original owner can find themselves that they cannot harvest their land economically because of all the restrictions being put on by the easement holder that are supposed to be these best management practices. Going on, another example, the easement may endow the purchaser with the authority to protect the so-called conservation value of the easement. Even though the landowner has reserved the right to farm, graze, cut timber, subdivide, or recreate on the easement property, the purchaser can define and expand the conservation value to a point at which the reserved use severely restricted or eliminated entirely. And all of a sudden, the previous owner finds they have no value left at all in that land and they have to walk away from it, basically giving the easement holder clear title to the property. In addition, an easement on the part of your land may affect the rest of your land or your neighbor's land. Again, for example, if one of the purposes of the easement is to restore wetlands, the management activities may flood the neighbor's property, then causing you to suffer a lawsuit because you're the one responsible for his flooding, not the easement holder. If the purchaser of the easement requires an end to, say, crop spraying, the result may be the spread of noxious weeds to the neighbor's property, again exposing you to a lawsuit. These conservation easements are a very, very dangerous tool that many American rural landowners are just jumping on the bandwagon because they are cash-starved, usually because of regulation. Smart growth is also supposed to reduce traffic congestion. That's one of the promises it makes. Again, through the use of public transportation, light rail, and so forth. But does it really do this? They promise, and it's true, that light rail is cheaper to build than expanding your interstate or freeway system. The trouble is that your road systems go everywhere. The light rail only goes one place. You can have a network of rail in high-density areas, like you see here in Portland, but what about all those other areas that are not served? We can also have what they call this beautification process, which is designed to slow down traffic and create hardships for the driver. As you recall, there are no new highways being built. It's all going into light rail, billions and billions and billions of dollars going into light rail. And the problem is that even if you live in a high-density area, you're still going to own and drive a car. And studies have basically shown that there is no difference, with this one exception, which is New York City. All the other areas that were studied showed that it really didn't matter whether you had high density or low density. The fact is that the miles driven are the same. And what happens if you have more cars squeezed into a tighter area with high density? Traffic congestion, the one thing they promised to eliminate, is actually made worse. And of course, the more cars you have, especially in stop and go, what you find is that you have less and less people actually using the transit system itself. New York City, the average is only 12%. The rest of them take taxis or drive. In Boston, San Francisco, and other major metropolitan areas, it drops to less than 5% actually use the transit system. Only a very small percentage of people use this transportation. And you get down to the smaller communities even yet, and it drops below 2%. Now, when you consider that 2% of the people are using a system that is almost as expensive as putting in highways, you've got a problem. In fact, it's so expensive that the Heritage Foundation, Wendell Cox, has reported that for the same money, each new commuter could lease a new Pontiac Grand Am throughout the life of the rail system and pay for more than 100,000 miles of air travel at the average ticket rate each year. They're charged 50 cents to $1 for a ride that's costing anywhere from $15 to $40 to provide. It's unbelievable. Going on in this same quote, he says, alternatively, one could lease the Grand Am and use the remainder of the annual subsidy for the average mortgage payment in the nation's most expensive housing market. In other words, our tax dollars are funding a system that is exorbitantly expensive, far exceeding any cost that a normal American would want to support. An average of $15 to $40 per ride that they're only being charged 50 cents to $1 to take that ride for. What you're looking at in, say, the Portland area is through the period of 1987, when it first started, to 1997, they doubled the amount of rail miles, but the usage remained the same. Meanwhile, the average freeway passenger miles increased by almost a third. They were not using the light rail. They were using their automobiles, suffering greatly because it was the same system. There's been no expansion of the highway system during this period, making their lives more miserable. Since the light rail line opened, growth in freeway traffic is 8 times the growth in light rail ridership. And yet not one dime is being spent on expanding the road system. And what you have is increasing congestion. And what you have with increasing congestion is declining air quality, or increasing air pollution. Exactly the opposite of what smart growth promises. Smart growth is a hoax. It not only does smart growth fail in every promise it makes, but its application increases the misery quotient of the majority of citizens. They just haven't realized it yet. They haven't realized that this is a planned effort to make their lives more miserable. What it does do, however, is it dramatically increases the power and the control of government bureaucrats over people. Denies their property rights and increases the control. And what we have to the Thomas Jefferson concept of the people's law, based on the Locke's model, is of God-given and unalienable rights, individuals, the federal government having the least power. This is what made this nation great, made it the most powerful nation on planet Earth. Through these special interests, big money, I'm talking about billions and billions of dollars, we have created what Thomas Jefferson calls the feudal ruler system of government, where all power lies in the state, that is filtered down through the lower levels of government until you have the individual who has no rights at all other than that which is given by the government itself. The whole concept of inalienable rights is lost, and they only have the amount of freedom that the government says they can have. That's what we're evolving to. Is that what we want? Is that what is best for this nation? Or should we get back to a constitutional form of governance in a constitutional republic, in the tripart system of government, making government less efficient rather than more efficient, because there's only one way that a government can become more efficient, is by denying and taking the liberties away from people. It's the only way. Thank you.